Hello and happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to Seminole Sidelines. My name is Nick Carlisle, staff writer, recruiting writer. That is Kurt Weiler over to my that way right there. That's Kurt Weiler, senior writer, and beneath me is head editor Bob Ferrante, who has apparently broken the undistinguished code that we're doing off colored teal today. So
Yeah, the blue. On Mondays we wear blue, Bob. Come on.
yeah, because we're so sad about how things have been going recently.
Feeling blue.
No teal.
wearing
Jaguars
blue.
lost on Sunday. The Dolphins. No
No,
teal
it's not
allowed.
teal.
Oh,
It's not blue.
it was great. What a great comeback. Wait, you're a Jaguars fan? You're a Jags fan?
Dolphins.
He's on your side, Nick.
Oh, he's on my side?
Yes.
Yes.
As long as we don't have to talk about my team. As long as we don't have to talk about my team.
I will. I'm only going to make you talk about one of your teams, Kurt. I'm not going to put you through double duty there. I'm only going to put you through double duty there. Anyways, welcome everybody to Seminole Sidelines. I hope you had a great weekend. Hopefully a lot of football in your household. I know it certainly was for me. But Coach Norvell and the coordinators got to talking today. A couple of interesting things to talk about. So we're going to get straight into that for the first half of our show today, then talk a little bit about everything else that happened during this past weekend of college football, which was nice. I know Kurt has made the comment to me. You know, we're not going to have many Saturdays like this moving forward where we can just sit back and watch the rest of the country look painfully average against FCS and group of 5 teams. So obviously, I think the big thing to come out of today's meeting with Norvell and the coordinators was a couple of injury updates. The big one is that running back, wide receiver, scat back, just general Swiss Army knife, Jalen Lucas will be out for the remainder of the season. Norvell did not disclose what type of injury it was, but he will be gone for the rest of the year. Which is a big blow to Florida State's offense if, the blows weren't bad enough there. Norvell also gave updates on Hyke Williams, saying that he is expected back this week against Memphis, and talked briefly about right tackle Jeremiah Byers, who has been dealing with a lower leg injury. He was on crutches against Boston College, but it does not appear, rather, that the injury will keep him out for a tremendous length of time. Guys, a lot to unpack there, but I will start with Jalen Lucas. How much does the loss of Lucas affect the offense? Because on the one hand, Lucas is by far your most explosive playmaker, or one of your most explosive playmakers, yet we haven't seen too much of him as we thought we have through the first 2 games. Just how much is his absence going to impact this offense? I'll go to you, Kurt, first.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of the guys who you produced, in quite a few ways. They used him in quite a few ways. The jet sweeps a lot in game 1, had a few big catches. I think, how many receiving yards did he have in game 2? I remember the one big catch that got him down inside the 10-yard line. That was a really big play in that game where it kind of felt like the tide might be turning late in the first half of the Boston College game. He's a small dude, but we talked all offseason about how fast he was. Probably one of the more impressive players of anyone we saw back in the spring. And I think we were all excited to see how Florida State could use him, and that still holds true. I think Mike made a point of saying today that he's a true junior. He played both his first 2 years at Indiana, didn't redshirt, so he can redshirt this year. It not even a medical redshirt, and have 2 full years left. So you have time left with him, but yeah, someone on our board today kind of was like, when it rains, it pours, and right now for Florida State, it kind of feels like a hurricane. Like, it is just, it is a mess right now.
No, absolutely. It feels, I think the word snake bitten comes to mind. Injuries happen in this sport, but to have that happen to a guy that you were hoping was going to become such a pivotal part of the offense, especially moving forward, it really, really stings for this offense. Bob, your thoughts?
Loved to watch Jalen Lucas. Obviously, in the spring, in the preseason, thought he was going to be a big factor for Florida State, as you guys were saying, in different roles this season. It's obviously really unfortunate because I think there are other options that you can use to replace him for sure, but there's not that one guy that I think kind of combines a lot of the things that he can do really, really well at a high level. I took to calling him pound for pound the best football player on the Florida State team. I think at 175, he was the most fun to watch easily, if you don't think he was the best out there. But yeah, I think Mike Norvell talked about a lot of guys who can fill in different roles to help out Florida State in the running back room, returner options too. So there are guys I think we're looking forward to watching both this weekend and down the road too.
Yeah, Lucas playing a big part in the kicking and punting game as well. Coach JP, John Papuja, said that it will likely be either Malik Benson or LaWayne McCoy stepping up there. I imagine that it'll likely be Malik getting the nod, and I think we'd probably see Deuce Spann, to be honest, on kickoff over LaWayne, just so that he doesn't have to burn a game off the potential red shirt if they don't have to burn one. So it'll probably be Malik going forward. And, it's not just on the punt and kick return where that opens up some opportunities. Obviously, it offers opportunities for somebody to step up in the running back room. Bob, I know that you and I talked about this extensively during the preseason. There were plenty of days that you and I stood next to each other watching 11 on 11 and watched Mekhi Danzy make plays and rattle off chunk plays on read zone, read option, and these off tackle runs. But you and I wondered how much of a role there was for him there with the running back room being as stacked as we thought it was at the time. I must admit, I was a bit surprised to hear Norvell mention Danzy first among the candidates for more playing time as opposed to a guy like Keziah Holmes, though Norvell did mention Keziah and a couple of other backs there later. Is there anything to take away from Danzy being named first here? And if he does contribute, Bob, how much of an impact do you see him making?
Usually I take a lot of stock in whoever Norvell names first. It's kind of like a reading of the tea leaves because it's just off the top of his head. I think on this one, it is newsworthy that he's saying Mekhi was on the scout team. He's no longer on the scout team, and he's going to be running with the offense in some capacity, whether that's ones, twos, or threes. I would maybe say this is more of an opportunity for a Cam Davis, more of an opportunity for a Keziah Holmes. It seems like every time Keziah touches the ball, something good happens in practices, limited touches in games. We need to see more of Cam Davis. I think that's a guy who the question was always, where is he in pass protection as a high school quarterback making this transition? It's not just running back at high school to running back at college. It's a little bit different. I think there's a lot of really good options here, different body types, different speed, different places in their development, but great options.
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted Cam Davis started the second half of that Boston College game. He was the first running back used to start the and I tweeted, feels like that speaks loudly about how far that trust has come. And frankly, I think he's been very good as a pass blocker when tasked with that. I think he's done some run blocking too in kind of a two-back set. And it's been impressive how far he's come in a pretty quick span because that was a struggle for a while there. But yeah, I mean, Cam had, I think, more carries in the first half of that Boston College game than LT did. And that kind of speaks to how the other ways they have to use LT. LT's, I mean, the state of the receiver room has kind of made them, and maybe that changes this weekend with Hakeem, but state of the wide receiver room has not been great. And so they've had to move LT around, but they're not lacking in options, but it kind of all hinges on, can the offense as a whole get more synergy? Can the offensive line do a better job? Can the passing game do a better job? All of those things are things that are going to need to happen for the running game to get going. The running game didn't get going because they've always had plenty of options. That's not why the running game hasn't worked through 2 games.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because this running back room was just so diverse in the type of bodies that you had in that room and what they were all capable of doing, their different skill sets. Nobody could quite be Jalen Lucas and what he brought to the table, but I guess if you had to pick somebody that could replace Jalen, it would probably be somebody more like an LT, somebody who can line up in the slot, who can also catch passes out of the backfield. But LT has kind of seen a decrease in his usage over it's only been 2 games, but he played much less against Boston College than he gets against Georgia Tech. So I don't know. There's definitely options there moving forward. We'll see who gets some touches, and I imagine that everybody will start getting a little bit more touches, especially if the running game gets off the ground. Again, everybody, if you have any questions, you want to make any comments, ask us anything about the last weekend or so of Florida State football. Obviously, they didn't play, but a lot happened over the last couple of days. Feel free to leave a comment in the comment section and bring it up. We'll get to it if it's a good question. Obviously, one of the things that we already talked about or mentioned briefly, Hakeem Williams, it feels like this was a big one. There was some momentum building before Boston College. You're like, oh, he might actually get in a little bit early, but no, he warmed up, couldn't quite get in there. Hakeem Williams is expected to play this week against Clemson. What should the expectations be for Hakeem coming back this week? I know that one man does not make an offense, and clearly Florida State has more problems offensively than just wide receiver, but what kind of impact do you guys think Hakeem can make, and what are you expecting from him on Saturday? Because it's one thing to be back in the game. It's another thing to be back and look like yourself. So where are we kind of expecting from Hakeem this weekend, Bob?
I think if you put Hakeem out there and say a 3-receiver set with Malik Benson and Kentron, that's a pretty good 3, right? I think Hakeem can stretch the defense a little bit more. We've been really questioning when can this defense, when can this offense stretch the field, make the defense respect the pass. It loosens things up for the run game. It's a big picture thing. I mean, you hit on it. The precision of DJU is one thing. The drops are another. The pass protection. It's a lot of different factors. But at this point, when you can bring in, again, not just a 5-star guy, but a 6'2" receiver who has clearly put in the work to make sure his second year at Florida State's really good, I think manageable expectations. Honestly, if he gets 3 catches for 55 yards and just the offense looks a little bit cleaner, a little bit better because he's in the mix, I think that's a manageable expectation. I'm not looking for back-to-back 100-yard games out of anybody right now. It's just, let's see this passing attack eat a little bit and look good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the expectation, maybe there's some false hope that plugging, your former 5-star wide receiver would magically transform the wide receiver room overnight. There's not really a world for me where that happens, but go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, well, and I think you talked about, what is he able to give you right away? I think you saw from him dressing out, and it seemed like coming very close to playing against Boston College. It seemed like he might have maybe been able to give you a little something Monday night if you needed it. But it's about letting him be on a better timeline. And I mean, we'll see how he looks this week in practice. But I can tell you Thursday, he looked very good. He was very impactful. He made quite a few plays, had a nice 3rd and long catch. I know a few just nice plays in situational moments, looked probably for my money as good as he has all preseason. So I think there's a valid reason for letting him come along on the timeline that's best for him. You don't, as great as it might be to help him, and I think we agree, he's not going to probably transform the offense, and he's not going to magically fix every issue. But getting him back, I think, goes a long way towards, and getting him back not just in the short term, but the long term, making sure he's 100% and good to go. And I think that's what you're getting. And I think, I think the deep threat he possesses. I mean, frankly, I think we thought that would be, supposing it's DJ Uyungle, and we don't know for sure. I think we thought the deep balls would be some of the better throws he can make. And so another deep threat on top of Jaylen Brown and Malik Benson, who both very much have that arsenal in their bag, I think can go a long way for stretching the field, testing the defense a little more, helping make everything better.
Yeah. And I think Bob touched on it a little bit earlier, but one of the things that I thought was interesting from Norvell today was kind of the wording and I guess general hinting or message when it came to not only DJ, but the rest of the offense, was that, these guys are just really tight and they're pressing a lot in the game. They're trying to make plays. And it actually kind of reminded me about last season, or maybe it was the season before, where Jordan Travis sat down with Norvell and they sat down with one another and had an honest conversation about enjoying playing football again. And you saw kind of as the season progressed, the play elevated. Do you guys think that there's a similar problem with this team and it's just as simple as making the game fun again and not pressing? Or is that kind of just coach speak and oversimplifying it? Are there some serious problems with this team that need to be fixed? Because no one can deny that this team on paper has a tremendous amount of talent, but getting the talent to perform as expected has obviously been a huge problem. Is it just that simple as, hey, guys, don't press?
I don't think it's just that simple, but if Mike Norvell's brought up the topic of pressing, I think it was obviously today, came up on Thursday, might have come up post-game after Boston College. It seems to be a consistent storyline. I think guys are talking about it. We've heard of both sides of the ball, honestly, not just offense. Defense too. We heard that from, I think, Blake Nicholson and some of the other defensive players too. So it's that desire to make a play. DJ Lundy said something that was really, I thought, has stuck with me after the game. Something to the effect of make the plays that are supposed to come to you, make those plays, and not just want to get out of your gap, get away from your assignment, make those that you are responsible for. And it's that trust type of thing. And I'll be curious what Kurt has to say, but I just think that's kind of a mindset that this team, it's a hurdle these players have to cross.
No, yeah, I think, and Adam Fuller kind of was asked about that and talked about a little today, like players saying that. I think he talked about, when maybe there are new pieces, when the defense as a whole is still figuring things out, there is a little bit of a guy knows his assignment, but sees something that he thinks is happening and says, oh, well, I should go do that. I can go make that play, leaves his assignment. If he guesses wrong, that is how a few of the big plays Boston College had, Georgia Tech have happened. I mean, it is, I think, about for sure that trust. I think we've talked about, or is that defense lacking the vocal leader, that cohesive guy that it feels like they had like 4 or 5 of on last year's team. They kind of felt like they had a plethora last year, and it feels like they're lacking it this year. I think the biggest thing to me, if they are pressing, and the fact that the coaches have kind of addressed it and brought it up somewhat at times unprompted, I feel like, is what can success do for them? You look at how the first 2 games have gone. They scored an offensive touchdown on the first drive of the season against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech came right down and tied it up. They never led again. They never led against Boston College. They have probably never felt, outside of that 5 plays before Georgia Tech tied the game, like they were in control of a game. If they get off to a strong start Saturday, what can that do for the comfortability of settling in, of assignments, of playing assignment-based football, of all of those things? I wonder if that can do wonders, and just the way the first couple games have gone for them have never really let them feel like they are on even footing and made that some of that pressing happen.
But so yes, but when you talk about all that, it's like, okay, so shouldn't there be leadership to be in place to prevent that from happening? Just on the football field. Like, I know that's a pretty open-ended on question, but it's like, I feel like they're at this point, say what you will about the Georgia Tech game, and obviously Boston College was ugly from start to finish. If they're talking about not pressing so much and trusting each other, that sounds like the talk of a team that's still learning how to win, not a team that was undefeated last year. And I know it's not the same team or whatever, but it's like, wouldn't you think that there's some leadership? Is that like a feigned attempt at trying to establish some kind of accountability there, or is that just a blanket? And I see you smirking, or is that just like we know we need to play better?
I mean, I think you can draw a pretty direct comparison between this year's Florida State team and this year's Michigan team. You saw what Texas did to Michigan. I'm serious. That is probably the 2 teams that lost the most NFL talent off last year's team. And you see how both of them have looked early this season, especially I would say on defense is a real comparison there. And they took different paths this offseason. I think Michigan didn't use the portal as much. I know didn't portal in a quarterback.
Well, they also stopped cheating, Kurt. There's that too.
Oh, sure. We can talk about that. But I think the bigger, as great as the joke is, I think the bigger thing with that Michigan team is look how much they lost. I'm sure a lot of those guys they lost were leaders. I'm sure. And that I think you can say the same for Florida State. I think you can draw the comparison between those two. And we don't need to get into how much of a shame it is that one of those teams got the chance to play for a title and the other didn't. We don't have to get into that. I'll just get mad again.
No. So Justin in the chat, obviously he said he's a Clemson employee, Clemson diehard fan, obviously not a fan of DJ. I did want to talk about, some of the comments that Norvell made, not just about DJ, but about the offense as a whole. It was a question kind of veiled around the quarterback conversation that's being brought up over the past week or so. It's been a hotly debated question on our boards for sure over the last week, but obviously DJ has not had the start to the season that he wanted to. And I'm glad I'm not a coach, so I don't have to use coach speak here when I say that, frankly, at times he's looked dreadful. He's looked unconfident, and he looked like he almost didn't want to be there at times. But Norvell today said that it's not all on DJ. There are issues with the offense as a whole. And to be fair, he is right. It's the entire offense that's been underwhelming, but you know how this works. A lot of the blame usually falls on the quarterback. Did you guys take anything out of Norvell's comments about the offense? Was it just deflection and coach speak and trying to protect the quarterback? Or was it a look on how Norvell is going to treat the rising call for a quarterback change if things don't go well offensively this weekend?
I don't think you can expect Mike Norvell to do a lot of overly criticize a player in a Monday press conference. I don't think he's going to use that forum. And I don't remember too many times that he has used that forum. He'll usually say that something like, the passing game was really struggling, or there wasn't a whole lot that really went right. But he's not going to throw DJU or the receivers had 7 drops under the bus, and he's not going to talk about the guy that he proclaimed as an All-American left tackle struggling. That's not how he rolls. But I think he's been pretty candid in a broad sense about just not a lot has gone right in the passing attack. I think to some extent, if we're writing these stories, if we're questioning if Brock Glenn can bring a different dimension to the offense, it might be that time to at least see what Brock can do in a limited opportunity. Give him a drive, give him something at some point in the game just to see how he can execute the offense. But again, there's a lot of things DJ's not doing well. The 7 drops definitely don't help you as a quarterback when the pass protection's coming in at you pretty hot. And yeah, it just doesn't look like it does at certain points in your preparation.
Yeah, I feel like we've all been saying, really, and we've had to talk about it so much, unfortunately, over a week now. We still have 5 more days for another game because of the bye week. And I do think the bye week could help Florida State. But
yeah,
both things can be true, that DJ has not played to the level I think Florida State hoped, and DJ is far from the only problem on the team and on the offense. Both those things can, and I think in this case very much are true. I maintain, we can agree to disagree, Bob. I can maintain that the wishy-washy quarterback switching is not the move. I think you kind of have to commit to Brock if you're committing, but we'll see how it plays out on Saturday. I mean, we'll see a little at practice this week. We probably won't be able to talk about that much, but it will, I think, inform us somewhat, and we'll see how things line up going into Saturday, because it feels like a precarious position if Florida State were to find itself in a hole again. I mean, that Memphis team is they're top 25 in the coaches poll. They're a fringe top 25 AP poll team. I think they're like 3 spots out in like receiving votes. I mean,
something like that.
It looks like a really good team, and I don't think any of us thought from recent levels that we'd be here we are. But it was a 6-point line when it opened yesterday that I saw for that game.
For which one?
The Memphis game.
The Memphis game.
Florida State favored by 6 at home, which means like neutral site about 2.5 points.
I usually don't pay too much attention to that, but I don't know. 6 seems that's an interesting opening. Before we go to break, I do want to briefly talk about something that William alluded to earlier in the show. Obviously, over the weekend, there were a couple of pretty huge decommitments on the recruiting side of things, and we're not going to get too far into it. We're going to leave that to Pat and Fish tomorrow. But 4-star defensive lineman Myron Charles flipping to Texas, and then probably your most important recruit of the class, 5-star Javion Hilson, opening back up his recruitment and decommitting from Florida State. Not going to ask you about the specifics. Again, we'll leave that to Pat and Fish tomorrow. But both Norvell and Papuchis were asked something along the lines of, what's your message to the recruits after an 0-2 start? And this is after the coaches got to go out on the recruiting trail this past weekend and see guys. I know that Ron Dugans was up in South Carolina to see wide receiver commit Malik Clark. And Papuchis said that the overall message was something along the lines of, I think that the biggest thing that we can do with our current roster, with the guys that we're recruiting, is continuing the belief and the values of the program. And basically, if you believe in what the program is about and what you saw that the program was in the last few years, then you got to just kind of keep the faith and play it out a little bit. I mean, that's about all you can say with a class that seems to be spiraling out of control a little bit sooner than you would have hoped. You guys, your thoughts on Papuchis' comments? Do you think that it's enough? And Norvell's comments, for that matter. Do you think it was enough? Do you think it was strong enough? Has the staff earned the ability to say, trust us, have some faith, we'll get it right? Just your general thoughts on that.
I mean, I wrote about it today. It reminded me of basically 3 years ago when Florida State was sitting 0-4, and Mike Norvell kind of went on an epic rant when asked about recruiting and what he's selling, when at that time he was 3-10 in his FSU tenure as a head coach. Things were dire, and it looked like that we were in line for another failure and that things might never get rolling under Mike Norvell. I think because he spoke so confidently in that moment 3 years ago, and in the immediate aftermath of that, until this recent losing streak, won 28 out of 34 games. That is a ridiculous run. I think he and the staff have the right to say, like, it's easier now. It should be easier now to make believers by saying, I'm not blindly saying this. I have evidence we have similarly turned things around when it looked like there was no hope. And so I think that I totally understand if people don't want to hear that right now. It is not an easy thing to hear, to be staring down not as severe a rebuild, as like you were at that time 3 years ago, but a readjustment of expectations is I think where we are for Florida State in the immediate future, obviously being all but eliminated from ACC contention 2 weeks into the year. So it's tough, but I think they've absolutely earned the right to say that from the track record, from coming out of similar, even worse circumstances 3 years ago.
Yeah, especially because from the recruits that I talk to on a daily basis, especially when the midst of the recruiting calendar, March, April, May, June, when they're coming on unofficial and official visits, one of the common things was, Norvell told no lies when he said that they would be in this position, 2 years later. When he said, hey, we're going to get it right. And, that was a common response that, we heard from kids was, hey, Norvell told us straight to our faces when we were meeting with him that he'll get it right. And he's done exactly that. So there is some hope yet that, maybe the ship will be riding in, that this recruiting class could just hold on and breathe for a little bit. We're going to take a quick break with a word from our sponsors. We'll see you on the other side. So kick your feet up for some 90 seconds, maybe go grab a drink, hit the bathroom, do whatever you got to do. We'll be back after a word from our sponsors, and we'll see you in about 90 seconds.
The Backshore. That stretch of fluffy sand just beyond the reach of the salty waves. The place reserved for volleyball nets, cookouts, and the air filled with fun and laughter. Celebrate the Backshore with Backshore Apparel. Grab an amazingly soft and comfy Backshore Apparel beach hoodie to keep you protected from the sun's harmful rays. Or the Backshore revamped trucker hat, a modern twist on a classic favorite. Crafted from moisture-wicking fabrics, ensuring they're lightweight and breathable. Not to mention durable with their unique floating feature. Shop now at BackshoreApparel.com. And right now, FSU fans get 10% off your order with code FSU10. Hey Seminole fans, Alumni Hall is your ultimate FSU shopping experience and has moved to a new location off Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. Shop FSU gear from Nike, Champion, New Era, Yeti, and more. Alumni Hall has Seminole gear for the entire family, plus accessories and gifts. Spend $150 and you'll earn $10 off your next purchase with their Hall Pass rewards. Stop by their new location on Timberlane Road near REI or shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. Alumni Hall, where Seminole fans shop. Finding an experienced lawyer you can trust is crucial. With over 50 years of combined litigation experience, the attorneys at Mowry Law Firm are dedicated to providing our clients with exceptional legal services, focusing on car and trucking accidents, premises liability, and wrongful death. Call 904-824-7799, MowryLaw.com.
And welcome back to Seminole Sidelines. Thank you all so much for spending part of your Monday with us, talking some Florida State football. Coaches press conference earlier today. And, if you missed the first half of our show, of course, it'll be available later, and it'll be available on Spotify and other streaming services if you prefer just the audio version as opposed to the visual version. We're not going to keep you too much longer tonight, but obviously some other news to come out of today. First of all, Florida State versus Cal. That is next week's game, will be a night game. That game got pushed to 7 p.m. kickoff for that one. Guys, does that help the Seminoles? I mean, the Bears, does it help the Bears? Is it just whatever? I mean, obviously, I think you'd prefer Cal to be baking in the sun if you were Florida State, or, does the night atmosphere help Florida State here? I kind of found it weird that it was pushed to a night game. I'm going to be honest. Does it help one side or the other?
I mean, so. Doak at night is always going to be, it won't be as hot. Doak at night is always going to be a little more active than if they had to put that game at noon. That kind of, I think, cuts both ways in some ways. I think what you're interested to find out about Cal right now, I know we're still a full week away, is I think their star running back, Jaden Ott, was not particularly effective against Auburn. They won that game. It's an impressive win. Yeah. Peyton Thorne sure gave him quite a few assists. And then I think their quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, got hurt late in that game too. I haven't seen anything about him today, so that'd be curious the state of their offense right now, injury-wise, because that's definitely something to monitor. I might be more concerned about that than the time or anything like that.
Bob, anything to add there?
I watched a lot of that Cal-Auburn game, and Cal was super impressive. I'm with you. 4 interceptions from Auburn. That definitely helped your cause, but Cal looked like they belonged. I think that was a team that we maybe undervalued or underjudged. Weren't sure how they'd make the transition to the ACC. weren't sure what they would look like, big road atmosphere, SEC stadium. But yeah, depending on how those injuries shake out, Kurt's absolutely right there. But if there are everyone's available, that's a dangerous team. But we'll see. I'm happy. I'm happy for a night game. I think fans like night games.
It'll
Writers
be cooler
on
for
Deadline
us.
don't love the night games.
Yeah, it's a late night.
Yes.
Yeah.
We overvalue or undervalued Cal and overvalued SMU, it would appear. It's only 2 games into the year. You can't write off teams 2 games into the year, but that would appear to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you after this, do you guys feel better or worse about Florida State's chances in that game against Cal when they come in next week? Is it just that Cal was better than we thought? And know that they didn't get exactly the production from Ott that we thought they were going to in that game. Was it Cal or was it Auburn just not putting it together seemingly in year 2 under Freeze? Or was it just a quarterback problem? Was it simply a quarterback diff?
I think for Auburn, they've got a quarterback problem. They might have a decent football team. They have
an offensive line problem too.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a bad combo.
You don't want to be the Auburn head coach in times like these. That's never very calm waters, right? I think Cal is definitely better than we thought. I mean, we have to acknowledge they're just flat out better than we thought. And I think they were without 2 receivers in that game too. I think the broadcast crew had mentioned that too. So who knows what Cal looks like? I think, how does FSU match up against them? I haven't gotten to that point yet. But just when you start looking at the personnel, they look better from a personnel and an organization standpoint. They were better offensively in the first half. I think maybe better defensively second half. So it is what it is early in the season too.
You definitely don't feel better. Go ahead.
No, I can't help but giggling. Thank God they have a religious coach and they can just pray for whatever is coming next.
Unfortunately for Florida State fans, I think I saw today that Hugh Freeze kind of said what I think people want Mike Norvell to say of like, we might have to make a change at quarterback. I think he kind of was like, whatever I think Hugh Freeze basically his press conference today was like, whatever Peyton Thorne's giving us in practice is not translating to the field, which is kind of exactly what Florida State fans would love to hear from Mike Norvell. And it's just, that is a difference philosophically between Mike Norvell and Hugh Freeze. But yeah, you can't feel better about that Cal game after what they did to Auburn. The jet lag of it all, the southern heat of it all definitely doesn't seem to affect them much. But I also don't think that would be Florida State's game plan. I don't think Florida State would air it out nearly as much as Auburn tried to against Cal. So it's not apples to apples.
Just in general, as I was watching football this past weekend, like sometimes I think it's easy to get stuck in our own bubble. Sometimes when you cover a college football team, on Saturdays we have to do our job. We're very focused on what's going on in our immediate kind of circle. Not very often do we get to kind of just sit back and watch everybody else's suffering for a change. And it was very like one of the themes from this past weekend. It was very apparent to me the difference in how good a team looks with a good quarterback versus a team that has a quarterback that's struggling. Obviously, you saw what Texas was able to do to Michigan versus what Cal was able to do to Auburn. I mean, for me personally, again, it's just a huge theme. Did what you watch around the country make you feel more strongly that Florida State needs to make a change at quarterback, or is it still the same for you? Like, was what you saw kind of did it elevate the urgency of the situation?
I'll tell you another one you didn't mention. I think Riley Leonard lost Notre Dame that game. It wasn't solely on him, but like I think Riley Leonard was, I would say, the main reason why Notre Dame lost that game. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it'd be hard to convince me too much more that that's what needs to happen. I just kind of like at a certain point, you're not getting what you need from DJ, and DJ can't be a long-term option. And this season isn't what you hoped it would be. So at a certain point, I think you have to start thinking about the future. But I do think it showed you, and again, we've talked about DJ being far from the only problem. It showed, like, could things improve pretty quickly if you give Brock a try and it works? Like how many different things could Brock fix if he's more ready now than he was 9 months ago?
Yeah, where's your stress level at, Bob? Any better or any worse?
Watching that SMU game Friday night, I thought to myself, I think Florida State might be able to take these guys. Look, the quarterback thing is a struggle for me because I think Brock might just be a better fit just because of his mobility, his athleticism, a little bit more decisive. I think how he processes is something that we've talked about. The decisiveness, how he processes, it just seems to be quicker and ahead of where DJ is. Let's give DJ the benefit of the doubt of being in this offense for 9 months. It's just not clicked yet for him. Now, has Brock looked great in practices? Not been a world beater, no. Have the receivers had drops? Is there still pass protection issues? There's a lot of different things. I've always talked about playing well around the quarterback. To me, this is as much a discussion of don't have 7 drops, pass protect better. Let's see how the quarterback can be successful, and less of, hey, let's make a move. But to some extent, I'm kind of watching DJ, and there are just too many passes like that Boston College game. If there were 7 drops or at least 7 throws that were a yard or more off the mark, and at some point you start to say, that's just too much. That's too far off the mark. And you're just giving away essentially 0 yards, but it's a negative play because it puts you in a bad down and distance. So I have very conflicted emotions. And of course, Mike Norvell probably does too, especially with Memphis coming in. And that's your old school.
Yeah, obviously Mike Norvell was very flattering in terms of, his comments on Coach Silverfield and the program that Memphis has and what they got coming in. I think he classified them as a top 25 caliber team coming in. And obviously there's emotional investment there. Obviously we're not going to preview Memphis too much. I know Pat Burnham's got a scouting report coming later this week, and I'm sure there will be plenty of previews for that game once we get to dive into, what Memphis is about, their personnel, what they're going to try and do on offense. But just in terms of the eye test and what we saw from them this past weekend, they looked much more effective in running the football, which is obviously the key dysfunction right now for the Florida State defense. Just your first impressions of that, guys. Do you feel better about Florida State's chances this weekend after watching Memphis, or do you feel like this may be a tougher game than they bargained for?
I think Troy looked like a first-year team with some serious growing pains,
Yes.
with a lot of players that followed, their coach to Tulane. So what is Troy? What is North Alabama, the opponent that Memphis started off the year playing? It's hard to tell how good Memphis is. It's easy to tell that Memphis capitalizes against a weaker opponent, is able to run the ball, is either able to throw, is able to take care of business at home. The variables change to a lot of extents. It's on the road. It's against a more talented opponent. I mean, I think we can easily say Florida State's more talented than Troy, even if those results on the field, on the scoreboard, haven't shown up. But I think what scares you about Memphis is they can run. They've got a passer who can really throw it. We haven't seen the secondary tested here at Florida State really yet. They're going to get a test on Saturday for sure.
Yeah, I think coming out of week 1, I know we talked about, Memphis didn't run the ball very well on a FCS team. Maybe that bodes well. Mario Anderson had 125, averaged over 7 a carry, and had 2 touchdowns against Troy. So, I do not think Florida State's defense is as bad as Troy's defense, but that speaks to, the dangers of 1 week sample sizes, and that it is a more multifaceted offense than I think we thought, and definitely a bigger challenge than we thought.
Yeah. Speaking of week-to-week sample sizes, and this will be the last thing before we go, I believe it was either on Friday or early on Saturday where we updated our season win predictions for Florida State. And I think that shaped up and held together for maybe about 5 hours before we started watching some football. And then Cal looked really, really good against Auburn, and Memphis fixed a lot of its running the ball issues that we saw the previous week. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a mulligan. You don't have to change your answer, but I'm giving you the opportunity here. Do you guys overall feel better or worse about Florida State's next 3 games? Does Florida State still hit the over at 5.5? Because I believe that all 3 of us had taken the over at the new line, which is projected at 5.5 wins.
I'll say this. If you're watching live or if you're watching the replay, leave us a comment in the comment section. Just tell us what you think. If you think Florida State will go over 5.5, I would definitely move Cal into the position of that's a much tougher game, and replacing SMU with, I think that's a much easier matchup, at least looking at it right now. I still think if you were adding them up, if you want to go Memphis, Cal, SMU, you factor in Duke, Charleston Southern, Florida, North Carolina is your wild card. You got the rivalry games. I still think there's a roadmap to 6. I really do think there's a good roadmap to 6. It's about leadership. It's about want to. It's about a lot of intangibles that I won't say they're correctable, because leadership may not be correctable, guys. I'm not sure at this point in the year if it can be fostered, grown, etc. But there is a roadmap to 6 for sure, to me.
Ask me Saturday night. You gotta. I'm serious. You kind of have to win this one. You kind of have to win this one. It's like, I think the thing is, I think this one tells us a lot. With the bye week, with 12 days between games, with time they return to some fundamentals in last week in practice. I need to see what they look like on Saturday.
I'm sorry, that wasn't one of the options that I gave you. I'm kidding.
I'm just making the C. This is an AB quiz. I am circling C.
No, and look, it's a week-to-week sport. I think our coworker, our co-peer, our fellow analyst, football extraordinaire, Pat Burnham, says this all the time. It's a week-to-week sport. What it's you think one week, it's day-to-day, but generally speaking, week-to-week, what you think one week may not reflect what you think the next week. Things change all the time. I don't know. I tease you for it, Kurt, but ultimately I agree with you. This is a game that we're going to have to see probably a win from Florida State in order to feel better about them making that 6-win mark that everybody hopes that they end up making at the very least after the start to the season. But that'll wrap it up today for Seminole Sidelines. I want to thank you all for joining us on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever you may be watching from. We got a lot of content from the Osceola coming this week at floridastate.rivals.com. Pat Fish and JP will be on tomorrow to talk a little bit recruiting, go more in depth about the big decommitments from Javion and the flip from Myron from yesterday and on Saturday. And of course, they'll be giving their thoughts and takeaways from the past weekend of sports overall. Florida State will be practicing tomorrow and Wednesday ahead of their game against Memphis this weekend. So we'll have practice reports ready for your ears and eyes. And then, of course, we have keys to victory and predictions coming on Friday. Some more recruiting content, some more stories from Kurt and Bob throughout the week. And then, of course, the post-game show on Saturday, hosted by Pat Burnham with Fish and Shane, more than likely also Mark Salva, former Florida State offensive lineman. So there's plenty of content planned for you throughout this week and beyond. And thank you all so much for watching. My name is Nick Carlisle. That's Kurt Weiler. That's Bob Ferrante. Remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you all so much for your continued support and your viewership. As always, we will see you tomorrow with another episode of Seminole Sidelines.